Hello and welcome to our weekly share on the Parsha, or as you know, those who are following me every week, then this is now a share which we're suspending our normal Parsha analysis with the commentary of the Alshich, instead to examine the journey that the Jewish people are on, because we are replicating it, trying to relive it, the journey from Pesach to Shavuos. But let's start, as we normally do, with our dedications. Let's start with the dedications for the people who are in need of a refuah shalema. We have Chaim Mordechai Dov ben Esther refuah shalema, Rafael Chaim ben Sora, who is doing well and should continue to do so. Auria Chaim ben Chadi Yehudis, little boy waiting for the lung transplant. That should happen quickly, easily, and successfully. Rachel Labana Bas Shirley has had good news. But still, of course, we're davening for her. Aaron Yedidia ben Tzipora Chaba is the little boy who's got a brain tumor, and we're davening for his refuah shalema. He's in Australia. Mira Riva Bas Sivia, she is a young lady in Canada who needs a refuah shalema. Prel Panina Brocha Bas Yehudis is a slightly older young lady, and she lives in Yerushalayim, and she should have refuah shalema. So we've covered several continents. The first ones were all in England. Also, it is the yortzeit of my wife's uncle, my late uncle, who was called Chaim Eliezer ben Yaakov. Quite a character. I think it's his second yortzeit. Remarkable, liked him an enormous amount. His neshama should have an aliyah in the Swiss of the Shir as well. And I need your help. It's the annual fundraiser for TorahAnytime.com. It's hard to think of a time when Klal Yisrael didn't have Torah Anytime, but the numbers, the hundreds of thousands, millions of hours of Shirim and Torah that people have access to all over the world due to these young men and all the wonderful team behind this initiative. I really do believe it needs their support. I'd like to give my thanks again for them hosting me. So if you enjoy these shirim, and if you enjoy other people's shirim Torah Anytime, if you enjoy my shirim in Torah Anytime's site, or you see it on my YouTube channel or any other outlet, then please, that's just a couple of weeks' time, 26th and 27th of May, I have undertaken to raise funds. I'm aiming for $10,000 for Torah Anytime, and I'd love you if you would support my ambition and aim. If you go to the Torah Anytime site, you'll find my, one of these matching donation things, and you'll be able to find me. And if you'd like to make a team and be part of my effort to raise money for Torah Anytime, I'd be very grateful. They really, really are worth supporting. And at a time when Klal Yisrael is under attack, as we certainly are, from our friends as much as from our enemies, then we really need as much swissing from the Torah that we could possibly have. So please, very important, if anything else, just because I'm really not very good at raising funds, and that'll make me look good for a change, please support my efforts to support Torah Anytime. Fabulous people. Okay, which takes us to the next stage of our journey. Now, in the last 2 weeks, as we're going through the weeks leading up to Shavuos, we've discussed exactly what that journey entailed. Now, of course, every journey that a person is on, in particular, if they're going into a place or a venue they've never been to before, if it's going to be a success, they need a guide. And the guide that leads us from Pesach to Shavuos, the Matan Torah, is, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu. So the next couple of weeks, I would like to look at Moshe Rabbeinu a little bit. But there's a parallel guide who leads us in the journey, and as we discussed in our last 2 weeks, because being on that journey was a transference, or transformation, I really should say, of a Jewish people who are not quite completely Jewish yet, to one who are. There's another parallel, another guide, and another guidebook that takes us on that journey of replication or repeating, and that is, of course, Ruth, and we'll move towards her and her story towards the last couple of shiurim in this this reenactment, Torah reenactment of the 7-week journey to Mount Sinai. Okay, so let's talk about Moshe Rabbeinu. So he is, of course, our guide. Who is he? Who is Moshe Rabbeinu? Now, of course, everybody knows. Moshe Rabbeinu is the son of Amram, who was the leader of the generation. Everybody is familiar with his sister Miriam, his mother Yocheved, and his brother Aaron the Cohen. We're all, it's a well-known story, but I'd like to take us a little bit deeper than we normally go, or people normally go in their understanding of Moshe. When I say who is he, I'm talking about it from a Kabbalistic point of view. I suppose I should really introduce a concept which will point you in the direction of my thoughts on this one. And that is, of course, for almost all commentators, classic commentators in Judaism, the idea of reincarnation is very, very much a part of what Judaism is believes and is an important concept for us to understand. The general idea of reincarnation is the soul comes here in order to achieve, through freedom of choice, what it could possibly do to improve itself. Every soul, every individual, in the same way that no two faces are the same, no two souls are the same, even identical twins are not identical. There is a difference. That's reflected in the faces, is reflected in the souls as well, and reflected in the job that they have to do. So when a soul comes here to the world for the first time, it has potential, but that potential has to be unlocked by choice, by the choices that we make in our journey in this world. Not now a journey of 7 weeks, but a journey of 7 decades, according to King David, or actually, according to Moshe Rabbeinu, because this you'll find in Psalm 90, this verse 10, when it says a man's life is 70 years or 80 years. And of course, these days is even longer. My wife's uncle I mentioned before, he was in his 90s. But generally, it's 70 or 80 years. That's the journey that we're on. And that journey is in order for us to make choices that's going to take the potential in that soul that we are. We'll be talking about souls in more depth in a second, particularly Moshe's soul, and realize that and realize all the potential of it. And unlocking that potential, of course, it has an incredible knock-on effect on other souls as well. Everybody we interact with in our journey in this Gilgul, in this incarnation, or iteration of our existence, because as Ramat Solomon, Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Livracha, the great Mashgiach, formerly of Gateshead Yeshiva, then of course of Lakewood Yeshiva, said many, many years ago in a shir, most of us have been here before. So when we come here the first time, where it's in order to take the potential of the soul and to unlock it. There's a beautiful Gemara in Brochus that actually says that the soul is waiting in the waiting room upstairs to be parachuted, or whatever the phrase would be, into a little body which is forming inside a mother's womb. And there's an angel that's going to accompany this little soul on its journey and teach it Torah inside his mother's womb. Famous Jewish medrash. And the little soul has a brilliant idea and says, Angel, Malachal, look, what's the best I could possibly do? The best I could possibly do is go down there and come back unsullied, undirtied, nicht verschmutzt, as they say in Yiddish, pristine and perfect the way I am now. But that is the way I am now. So why not just keep me here and give me my reward? The Malach says, oh, no. Can you go down there? Make the choices that are going to allow you to cast off the dirt. That's not just the dirt, the physical dirt affecting your body, the outside, but the spiritual dirt that's going to try and attach itself to the inside. You're going to hear all sorts of stuff you shouldn't hear, language that you shouldn't listen to, concepts that you should reject. Your job is to do that. The challenge is, can you go down there and come back the way you are now? That's why you're here. So to return to my previous question, who was Moshe Rabbeinu? Because was it Moshe Rabbeinu's first time on planet Earth? According to the Arizal, no, it wasn't. According to the Arizal, he'd been here before. And in actual fact, he was well known to you, to me, to us in the Torah as being one of the original characters in the story of the Torah, the story of humanity. He was the son of Adam Rishon. He was Hevel. Now, Hevel, here's an important idea. The names that the Torah gives to people, the name that you and I get, and this is something we've certainly discussed in the past, there, Sharon, the name that you and I are given at our birth was one that was inspired and put into the heads, the minds of our parents to give us, because your name is you, or maybe more accurately, your name in Lashon HaKodesh describes you. The potential that we were talking about before, locked into every single soul, is contained within the name that you're given. And the Hebrew names, if you know how to decode them, breaks down all of the strengths and weaknesses that the person contains within him. And your job here, as we said before, is to unlock the good and to reject the bad, and you go back pristine. The first time that Moshe was here, he was called Hevel. Now, if our individual names describe us, when the Torah gives names to people or defines somebody by a name, then very, very much that is who and what we are. So consequently, Moshe Rabbeinu was Hevel before, and Hevel is a word anybody familiar with, of course, the book of Koheles, Hevel Havolim Akol Hovel, that it's nothing. Everything is nothing. Moshe Rabbeinu is Hevel. When he's Hevel, he is a nothing. A nothing? It describes his personality. A Hevel is a nothing. Somebody who considers himself to be a very humble person. Somebody who sees what he is, what she is, as being of little worth. And therefore, that's who Hevel was. Cain, in opposition, is very, very different. Cain, as the Pasuk says, Hashem says, I have acquired a soul. Kanisi, that's the Hebrew word, I've acquired something. If you acquire something, it's something which exists. Hevel means nothing. A Kenyan, a Cain, is a something. And both of these potentials were in Cain and Hevel. Both have the potential to maximize who and what they are, depending on the basic ingredients of their soul. There's a way to do it when you see yourself as being a nothing, and a way to do it when you see yourself as being a something. Both pose problems. If you see yourself as being a nothing, then you may be very reluctant to in any way stand up and be counted, to innovate, to contribute, to instigate projects in your own life, in your own connection with Hashem, and certainly for other people as well. If you consider yourself to be a something, Kayan, that's what the word means, then you consider yourself to be an innovator, somebody who's going to make their mark in the world. And of course, that's a fabulous thing. Both are fabulous things. But the classic Musar message, when it's talking about character traits, human character traits, whether it is one of innovation and a personality that makes its mark, or one which is reluctant and shy because it's a humble soul, both have positives, but both have negatives as well, as we just described. Hevel, that's Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, again, remember, if you're here the first time, it's in order, as we said, to maximize the potential that you have. Suppose you didn't, then you're sent back, or can be sent back, in order to achieve what you failed to achieve in a previous life, or to repair the damage you did in the previous life. So what is the problem with Hevel? But okay, enough of me giving the outline. I'm going to take you to, this is one of my very favorite Sforim, and it's a Hasidic sefer. It's called the Shem Mishmuel. And he starts by quoting the Arizal. And just for a bit of excitement of dipping into an Arizal and a Kabbalistic insight, or Hasidic insight, if you prefer it that way, let me read to you a little bit of what's going on. Lahovin inin Korach. Now, this he says in the story of Korach, right? Moshe and Korach are in conflict. Of course, they're cousins. Let's see what that conflict's all about. Hine, Belikuti Torah Ma'arizal, a work called the Likuti Torah, the author, the Arizal, the great Kabbalist of Sfas, who was, incidentally, if I've not told you this 1,000 times, the Talmud, the Gemara Talmud of the Alshich HaKodesh. Got to mention the Alshich in any share. Da ki tosir hevel mimoshe tisha korach. And he says the following thing. Now, this is Kabbalistic and Chassidus, so at first blush, it's going to seem a bit impenetrable and a bit confusing and a riddle. If you subtract, he says, where's the place? When you subtract Hevel from Moshe, you're left with Korach. So we're talking gematrias. Kabbalistics forum love gematrias. So Moshe, the numerical value of Moshe is pretty obvious because Shin is obviously 300 and Mem and He is 45. So therefore Moshe spells out 345. Hevel is 37. If you subtract 37 from 345, you're left with 308, which is Korach. So there's an interconnectivity between Moshe, Hevel, and Korach. Now, let's see if we can go a little bit further. I hope this is not too confusing for those of you who might be watching this and this is not your usual bailiwick, not your usual area of comfort zone. But anyway, I think this is fabulous. Listen to what he says. Ba'inen ki behevel hoyabo lamed zayin nitzutzim tovim b'kol shinches haraim rak b'moshe netak nekulam. So if we put that back together again, Moshe is 345, and we say there is 37 in Hevel. If we're just talking about the numerical value, and 308 in Korach, because if we subtracted 37 from 345, we're left with Korach. These are the potentials. That big number 345 is the potential of the soul, the elements of, that's a better word, the elements of the soul of Moshe and of Korach, both descend from Hevel. And within the potential of every soul, as we said before, is negatives and positives. Hevel, this time, comes back as Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, when we think of the story of Cain and Hevel, you will know, of course, that Cain comes up with the idea of bringing an offering to Hashem. Hevel thinks it's a good idea and decides to join in the project. The Yiddish word for that is a Nochschlepper. He didn't innovate. It wasn't his notion, his idea, his concept. It was his brother's concept because he's a doer. He's a something. He's going to make a contribution, but he's certainly happy to go along with it. He's a Nochschlepper. And of course, being somebody who doesn't innovate, that is a problem in and of itself. Because in allowing your humility to predominate, it can annul any possibility of you standing up and doing something when it needs to be done. That doesn't apply to Cain. The negative, though, to Cain, as they say in English, is that he's a doer, but a doer can lead to all sorts of problems with ego. And that's precisely what happens the second time. When he comes back the second time as Korach, then indeed he's a doer. He knows he's got potential. He's got greatness within him and greatness of ambition. But that leads, of course, to a distortion, ego. And the ego leads to the conflict with Moshe in the second Gilgal of both, in the second reincarnation of both. But with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu, who is humble beyond humble, Mr. Hevel, who sees himself as nothing, who doesn't innovate, when he comes back the second time, even though, as the Torah says, he's the humblest man who ever lived, humbler than before, but that doesn't stop him being an innovator. It doesn't stop him making choices this time to act despite his humility. But we have to investigate that idea a little bit deeper, and we will do in a second. But if you got the general idea, who is Moshe? Moshe is here a second time. I can't emphasize this enough. In order to rectify the mistake that he made when he was here the first time, when he was Hevel. And the idea that Moshe Rabbeinu came into the world and he was a perfect man and he made no mistakes and he was just, everything was perfect from the beginning. And this is all total nonsense, as I'll demonstrate. The greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu is Moshe Rabbeinu became Moshe Rabbeinu. Not he was born Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu chose to become the person who would be Moshe Rabbeinu, and we're going to see that in the words of two of the great minds of the Muslim movement, that is Reb Simcha Zissel of Kelm and his Talmud once removed, Reb Shlomo Wolbe. Fine. Having said that, I think I'll take you straight to Reb Shlomo Wolbe in his wonderful Ali Shor. Reb Simcha Zissel was the founder of the Yeshiva of Kelm. His most famous Talmud, I think we can say that, was Reb Yerucham Levovitz. And Reb Yerucham Levovitz, he was the teacher of Reb Shlomo Wolbe. So it's Rebbe Talmud, Rebbe Talmud. Okay, so basically, if we turn to Chelik Beis of Ali Shar, and we turn to page Ayin Daled, then here is a remarkable observation from the Gemara in the Kolin and Pei Tes, and it's Pei Tes Amud Aleph, and I'll read this to you. Godel shenemer b'Moshe v'Aaron Yosef v'Mashe nemer b'Avram. It's much more, a much greater thing the Torah testifies about Moshe and Aaron than it testifies about Avram Avinu. Of course, Avram Avinu was, who is Avram Avinu? It's unbelievable. On a madrega, which it's very hard for us to to conceive. Let me read to you what he says. The Avot, the forefathers of the Jewish people, Barakim, and only the forefathers of the Jewish people, were reached the level where God was willing to attach his name to them. And that's why there's Psukim say Elokai Abraham, Elokai Yitzchak, Elokai Yaakov. God was willing to say that he was the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Therefore, this shows the level that they were on. But that, he says, Lokein Moshe Rabbeinu. That's not how God defines his relationship with Moshe Rabbeinu or Moshe Rabbeinu's relationship with him. Rather, with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah, Hatar, the name, the label, if you like, that the Torah gives him, who Eved Hashem. He's the Eved Hashem. So they are all defined by the fact that God is willing to attach himself to them, but Moshe Rabbeinu is himself the Eved Hashem. Now, what does that mean? He says the following thing. Borher is clear. Shilohoyim b'medregs shaynas. Obas hakadoshim b'noretz tzidkosam taharos kadoshos libam hoyim midvakmim b'moshavsam l'rotzal nizborach kol yimeim b'li hefsek rega. The distinction between the Obas and Moshe Rabbeinu is that the Obas, at every single stage of their life, every moment of their life, this is beyond my conception, by the way. It's not beyond my conception, but it's certainly not something which I relate to, as it were, as part of me. Every single moment of their day, every single waking moment was a journey in their mind and in their heart of attachment to God, a persevering to understand God, Hashem at the most profound levels, a total life dedicated to Hashem. That's why you can say that I'm the God of Abram. I'm willing to be called the God of Abram. So therefore, fine. Be koiberit soinem kol koichos sheba'olam ule'efes v'toihu noshoba etzlam. Everything the world could offer, money, power, prestige, passions, was nothing to them. Their only thing was Hashem. And that's why Hashem was quite willing to attach his name to them. Which is why the rabbis say that therefore Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov became, as it were, the base, the place where the presence of God was manifest on the earth. He was willing to, as it were, use them as the conduit to be on the planet. And now he says the Gemara Mechulin. With regards to Obos, it says the following thing. It says with regards to the Obos, Avram says, Anachi offer for Ephraim. The Torah says that when he was pleading for or to save the inhabitants of Sodom, in part of his plea to Hashem, he says, I'm offer for Ephraim. I'm just dust and dirt, dust and earth. With regards to Moshe and Aaron, it says, "V'nachnu ma." What are we? We are nothing. As Rosh Hashanah goes on to say, and that's very interesting. Avram considers himself to be just dust and earth, whereas Aaron and Moshe consider themselves to be nothing. There's a distinction, isn't there? And the distinction is that dust and earth, he considers himself to be dust and earth. And I don't, by the way, and I'm guessing you don't either, but he did. But dust and earth is still something. It's still there. It's an entity. It exists. If you say, I'm nothing, and you feel you're nothing, that's a much greater level of, the Hebrew word is baklus, of annulment of the sense of I and embracing Hashem as being the Ein Od Mavado. There's nothing apart from Hashem. In other words, they're on much higher Madrega. Moshe is a much higher Madrega than Avraham. He's got no concept, or no, it's wrong, concept's wrong word. He's got no feeling of self. His self is completely Hashem, whatever Hashem wants, and at a higher level than Avram Avinu. Okay, fine. Now, he says the following thing. With regards to Moshe Rabbeinu, let me read this. Ein nes bli bal nes. There's no such thing as a miracle without the agency of somebody who is the conduit through which the miracle occurs. And to be that conduit, you need to be somebody who annuls this process we've talked about that does apply to the Avot and applies to Moshe as well, and annuls yourself, removes the I to allow Hashem to flow through you. And somebody who's reached that level becomes the channel through which Hashem will turn nature and the physical laws of the world upside down or annul them altogether. And when Moshe Rabbeinu reaches that level, he is worthy of being able to get to the level of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Fine. How did he do it? But how did he do it? How did he turn himself into that person? Because it's a matter of choice. He chose to become somebody great. Now, then we'll go over to this sefer here. This is Sefer Chochmah Musar of the great founder of Kelm. Great mind. Unbelievable mind. And in his first mimer, he talks about the mitzvah. It's the mitzvah of Ahavta L'Recha, perhaps we could describe it like that, to love your neighbor as yourself. But also is expressed, the same concept is expressed in Pirkei Avos when it says one of the ways the Torah is acquired is Nosa ba'olam chaveri, to bear somebody's suffering as though it is your own suffering. In order to be able to do this in a beautiful essay, which we don't have time to go through all of, he says it's essential for you to picture in your mind that the person who's going through the pain, it's you going through that pain. You'll not be able to feel his suffering and deal with the suffering. You'll not be the person who is able to intervene in the suffering and alleviate the suffering unless you can picture what that suffering is, and therefore you'd have to feel it yourself. To give you a crude example, when people often come to me to discuss the topic of cancer. Not that I'm an oncologist, not that thank God, and God forbid I've ever had cancer, but my late wife had cancer for 5 years before she passed away. I wrote a book about this called The Little Book for Big Worries, dealing with serious illness. I know what they're going through, so people feel confidence and are confident in coming to talk to me about this, knowing that I will understand what they're going through. When you go to somebody with a problem, you really need to feel that they not just sympathize, but empathize, that they feel your pain. How is it that a person is able to do the mitzvah of Nosa ba'olam chaveri? How can you love somebody like yourself? You've got to make them like yourself, or make yourself like them. Does that make sense? He says you only do that by picturing it, by having a picture, a clear picture of what that suffering is. both an intellectual picture and a picture in your mind. So let me jump into Sefer Das Chacham Musar, and it's in page Gimel, right at the very, very beginning of this essay. We see with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu, the Parsha Shema, it's right at the beginning of Parsha Shema. It says, "V'yigadel Moshe," and Moshe grew up. Or the real translation of V'yigadel is became great. And he goes out to see his brothers and to see their pain and suffering himself. And Rashi says, Nosan Eno Beliboy Lias Meitzernem. He looked with his eyes and with his heart to be distressed at their suffering. And the Medrash says he actually helped them in the work that they were doing, schlepping the big blocks of stone, etc., in order to feel the pain that they were going through. And then when you feel the pain that the person's going through, then you'll be able to help them. Let me read on. That's the Seperish. Hergel Atzmai. That means what's the word? I can't think of the word. Became as one with them. Perish Hergel Atzmai Betzir Ke'elo. He made himself used to making pictures in his mind like that. Korla Zois, Balachen Chola Lirois Miyadua, Ki Koya Chatzir Hu Miskarbas Chush. Because if a person's got a picture in their mind, well, that picture in the mind allows you to, if you've got it through, think of something you see somebody suffering and you can't get the picture out of your mind. Good. Not being able to get the picture out of your mind will make sure you don't forget the person and you will go and do what you're supposed to do to help the person. But Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't want to get the picture out of his mind so that he will be able to go and help the Jewish people. Ad shehergish, until he feels that he is like them. And that's why when Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Hashem after his seemingly failed first encounter with Paroi, in the mission he's been sent in, he says, Lama haroes lama zeh. And the angels wanted to kill him for that. But Hashem says, no, he's just doing what I told him to do. Picturing in his mind what they're feeling, expressing what they're feeling, because he's as one with them, and he's feeling what they're feeling. It seems to be that when he challenged Hashem with why are you doing it, it's much worse than the hitting of the rock, that famous incident when Moshe Rabbeinu seems to disobey Hashem. That's why the angels challenged him. Hashem says no, he's doing the right thing. Therefore, he says that Moshe Rabbeinu has gone out, said Hashem to the angels who are complaining. He gave his eyes and his heart liyas mates a bit soren show Israel. Rashi already explained. To give his eyes, that was to consider what was going on. But to put it into his heart. You can see it and start forgetting about it. Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't do it. But this is a process. He went out to do this. It was an action, an act to engage. He goes out to engage, to make sure this process happens, that he won't forget. And as a consequence, he becomes the Yigdal Moshe. He becomes greater. But that was a choice. Moshe Rabbeinu chose to become greater. This humble man is not unaware of his strengths, but you have to develop and grow those strengths. In order to want to become motivated to intervene in somebody's pain and somebody's suffering, you have to see yourself as though you're going to go out there. You've got to choose to go out there. You've got to choose to schlep those big blocks with them. You've got to become one with them. That's not just a stand back and do nothing, as he did when he was Hevel in a previous Gilgal, in his first Gilgal. No, he still is the humblest man who ever lived, as it says in the Torah, but now it doesn't stop him becoming a man who acts, and both can live simultaneously somehow with regards to Moshe Rabbeinu. Yeah. Let me read to you, go back to Ali Shur. Because we're going to go into this, carrying on their analysis of Moshe next week. But there's a Medrash Rabbah, which I found in Ali Shur, and I have to tell you, I only saw this last week. When I read this, I had tears in my eyes. Literally, I found this very, very moving, and I hope you do too. I'm actually going to read the whole thing to you. It's a paragraph, but I promise you, it's truly worth this. to see how a person can change and choose, as Moshe did, to become Moshe. Moshe grew, Vayigdal. Moshe chose. If he'd been back in the world to repair damage in a previous life, by definition, he has to choose and make choices. And if he can choose to make choices and change, so can we. As the Rambam famously says, everybody can reach the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm not splitting any Hudson rivers, where I come from in Glasgow, the Clyde, or the River Irwell in Manchester, where I used to live, or the Thames in London. I can't do that. It doesn't mean that. It means in the same way as Moshe Rabbeinu maximized who he could be in order to perfect himself, so can we. Okay, let me read this beautiful thing. Saifrega, Yotzas Baskan, the last moment of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, a heavenly voice called out, but Omra Hagia Saif Misasecha. The moment of your death, the moment of your life is over. This is the moment of your death. Omar Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe says to Hashem, I request from you, I plead with you. Don't give me over into the hand of the angel of death. Yotzes called, the heavenly voice called out to Moshe Rabbeinu, but Omar said to him, don't be afraid. The angel of death will not have anything to do with your passing from this world to the other. I'll deal with you. And the Medrash says that Hashem actually buried Moshe Rabbeinu and covered his grave. Okay. But at that moment, Owen Moshe, the Kiddush Atzma, Kistrofim, the Yord, Kadosh Baruch, Mishmi Shmaim, Eliana Belitzel, Nishmasei. So Moshe Rabbeinu prepared himself for death. And at that moment, Hashem came down to take his soul. Shemoshe, Omer Kadosh Baruch LaMoshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, Moshe, Hashkev enecha zeh al gabi zeh. Close your eyes. Close your eyes so both eyelids come together. Hashkev enav, and he did that. Put your hands on your heart and your chest. So he did. Put your feet one on top of the other. And he did that too. This, of course, is unsurprisingly paralleled in the laying out of a body for Jewish burial today. So he did that. So at that moment, Hashem called out to Moshe Rabbeinu's soul, mitoch gufay, to come from his body. Omer lo, and he said to him, Hashem says to the soul, Biti, my daughter. So that's interesting. Soul is the feminine. My daughter. Kuf kol shana ketzvasech hayazcha begufo shel Moshe. For 120 years, I've commanded you to inhabit the body of Moshe. Asham, now, says, time's up. Your time to be there is over. Now come out. Say, al tachri, come out from that body. Don't delay. Omar Lefonov, the soul of Moshe says, Rabban Shalom, Almighty, Yodea ani sha'ata elokai kol haruchos. I'm perfectly aware that you are the Hashem who controls everything. Ruchos, that's all the angels. The kol hanefashos, and all the souls. Nefesh hachayim va'mesim masrech me'edecha. Life and death is yours. Ba'ata barasani, ba'ata yitzani, ba'ata nasati begufa shel Moshe, guf kol shalom. You created me, you formed me, and you put me into Moshe to be here for 120 years. But Rabban Shalom, is there a body in the world which is more pure, a place in the world more pure than this body in which I've been inhabiting? That will not be in any way defiled by the grave. No worms will eat it. It's a perfect body and won't and doesn't require the process of decomposition, which one day will be reversed with Tekiyas Amesim. It is already perfect. Moshe Rabbeinu's soul says, I love this body. I love this perfect body. And please forgive me, but I don't want to leave it. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Neshama. Hashem says, Neshama, soul, say the Al Techrei. Come out. Don't delay. Don't tarry. Because I intend to take you up to the very highest places in heaven. And you're going to sit at the foot of my throne in heaven. Etzel Kruvim, next to the Kruvim, the angels, the Srophim and the Seraphs, the Gedudim and different types of angels. And still, the Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu says, Uza be'uzea bechemde b'nois atzois v'shchisei darchem shel ha'oretz talisa leisa bein ha'oretz n'rukia. Rabban Hashem, that place you want to take me to with all those angels. But those angels, when they came down to earth, behaved in such a disgusting way that you had to deal with them. They had a special punishment set out for them. The whole story of the angels at the end of Parshas Noach, and they came down and chased after other men's wives, etc., etc. So angels up there, when they came down here, they were a mess. But Moshe Rabbeinu was not a mess. Avon Ben Amram, but this Ben Amram, from the moment you first appeared to him, he separated from his wife. There was nothing physical in the world that interested him. Husband and wife separated. She was quite happy with that separation. He was not in any way tempted by anything, any passion, any desires that this world could offer, even to be with his wife. That was not the way the angels were in heaven. Moshe Rabbeinu is greater than the angel when he's on earth, because when they come down here, they were terrible. He wasn't. So therefore, please, let me stay. Let me stay in the body of Moshe. What greater place could there be? At that moment, Hashem kissed Moshe's lips. Of course, remember, when he created human beings, he blew the soul in through the lips. Now he's going to take the soul out through the lips. But not on Nishmasel, but Nishikaspe. He took out the soul by Nishikaspe. What a level to be on. Now that's Moshe Rabbeinu. And we'll explore this concept of how Moshe got to where he was next week in greater depth. And I think we'll be able to have already started to see why to have a guide like that is going to guarantee that the journey is successful and we're going to come to Mount Sinai. I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. I look forward to seeing you next week. Oh, and I should, if you're with me to the end, I should have apologized. Last week's share I put on Torah Anytime and in my own YouTube channel, the same share as the week before. So you get part one twice. I changed that, so just in case you think you've lost part two, I put it back up, or I put it up, and it was there yesterday from Wednesday. So if you want to keep all these share in order, number two is still there. Have a good Shabbos.